Welcome into the college football recap. My name is Jeff Cameron. I am with On3. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to get started on our maiden voyage here. We will do this each Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time moving forward. Have an opportunity to take a look at the top 25 throughout college football. You guys like and subscribe as always. Another reminder, as I do talk about the On3 network and the very best that these sites have to offer and their insights in college football, we'll have various guests on each weekend as well. Today being the first of those trips, we'll have three guests on this morning. Recap games. We choose games prior to the weekend getting started that we're going to want to focus on to bring attention to these sites and the excellent work that these guys do. Gary Furman from Canesport.com will join us later in the show in a reaction to Miami's road loss to Texas A&M. We'll talk to Thomas Frank Carr from Penn State, Blue and White Illustrated. Obviously, Penn State rolled onto the Plains and dominated Auburn. Penn State off to a great start. He'll join us in a little bit as well, and we'll talk about the Nittany Lions, as well as Nebraska and the mess that they find in Lincoln as they are on the wrong end of a colossal beatdown against Oklahoma. Robin Washington is going to join us. I've talked with him before of the great website Husker Online. It's only $1 for the year to get On3's best. Right now, you're going to want to join up. $1. You'll see it there across your screen for a whole year of coverage. Join On3 today. Opportunities to do these shows, talk with these great guests, guys on the ground covering the team week-to-week basis, giving you the best from all of the team sites. All right, on to the top 25. A pretty straightforward weekend where most of the favorites dominated their opponents. We see the scores there on the screen in the top 25. Some scores of note: Georgia just keeps rolling, looks to be the definitive best team in the country through the first 3 weeks of the season. 48-7 over South Carolina in a game that was never really competitive. Alabama didn't have a real opponent this week. Oklahoma, as I just mentioned, rolls into Lincoln and dominates Nebraska 49-14. Washington with a bit of a statement game there against Michigan State. Really, that score could have been a little bit more lopsided. They win 39-28. Good day for the Pac-10 there. BYU on the wrong end of a beatdown from Oregon, 41-20. And think about what Oregon has been through already in this young season, having been blown out by Georgia. A lot of people questioning just what Oregon would be year one with Dan Lanning, but they bounce back nicely and get a statement win there, asserting themselves within the top 25. I mentioned Penn State's win on the Plains. Auburn will be looking for a new coach. Ohio State, not a real opponent against Toledo, 77-21. NC State with a nice win, 27-14. Best they've played yet on the young season. And two offensively challenged teams went after it with Texas A&M and Miami. Mentioned that as well, 17-9 there. Some numbers across college football that are kind of fun to take a look at early in the season. Georgia has allowed just one touchdown this season through 3 games. So we talk about what Stetson Bennett has done and what this Georgia offense looks like, but it's again the defense that is absolutely mind-bogglingly good. Ohio State and Alabama have combined to score 140 points against mid-major foes. Ups and downs for the SEC, as we well know. It was a good bounce-back night for Texas A&M to get the win. Jimbo Fisher feeling the heat this week as their offense struggles. It still struggled, but the defense showed up and played really well against Miami. And then if you didn't see it, well, now it's must-see television, right? Every week, all of us, no matter where we are, your local watering hole, perhaps at your house, perhaps with your best friend, wherever it might be. Yeah, man, we're going to watch Appalachian State. We're not going to not watch Appalachian State. They went on a last-second Hail Mary, as you saw. Think about the 3 weeks of the season for Appalachian State, a game they could have quite easily won against North Carolina, had the overthrow, as we saw. That was a wild affair. Then they turned around and got the huge upset. They were the talk of college football with a win over Texas A&M. And then this victory, rather improbable. The Sun Belt's a fun conference to watch. Troy, I think, has the best defense in the Sun Belt, and here they were with an opportunity to win, and yet the Hail Mary does them in 32-28. Kansas. All right, Leopold. How about that? Folks in Kansas have a reason to be excited, and it's not basketball season. They're undefeated. Duke's playing well. Syracuse beats Purdue in a wild fourth quarter. Indiana got a win, and I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a betting man. That one hurt me. I had Western Kentucky. Great comeback win for Indiana there as that game went to overtime. I was watching closely. What, you weren't watching Indiana, Western Kentucky closely? This guy was. And a field goal is good for Indiana. They win, and there it is. There's the celebration. By the way, a little note here. If you go back and watch after the Troy Appalachian State Hail Mary ending, there's something kind of fun, and we forget about it a lot. So the fans come onto the field. Obviously, there's a massive celebration. In the back of the end zone, you'll see Appalachian State's captain go over and give a hug to a Troy player who is overwhelmed with emotion, having watched that Hail Mary play out. Pretty cool moment between two athletes that had just gone to war with one another, hugging in the back of the end zone, opposing jerseys while the fans go nuts. It's kind of what it's all about, right? Nice moment. We don't get a lot of those. We tend to hyper-focus on the negative and really everything that we follow in sports, but you had a moment there that was really, really nice to see. So welcome in, everybody. Another reminder, make sure that you join us each week. As I said, we'll hop around to On3's best, website to website, get an opportunity to talk with the very best in the business covering their teams. I want to start. It's going to be tough. I've talked to Robin before. He's going to be the first up to join us here. Robin, you drew the short end of the stick, my man. We got to talk some Nebraska football, and it's anything but easy right now for the Cornhuskers. And by the way, the other thing I would tell you, good to talk to you again, man. I feel really, really bad for Joseph. I mean, what a way to start a career. Mickey Joseph deserves better, Robin.
Yeah, that he got thrown right into the fire, and clearly that was a little bit more than anyone, let alone himself, could have chewed. So that was a tough spot. Obviously a week ago today, the news broke that Scott Frost had been let go, and they promoted Mickey Joseph to interim, and he had a lot of issues to try to address in a short amount of time, jumping right into game week, and clearly, they did not have nearly enough time to get done what they needed to even be remotely competitive in that game against Oklahoma. That was about as close to JV versus varsity as you're going to find at the Power 5 level. And so, they're in a real tough spot. And to be fair, the first 5 or so minutes of that game, they looked fantastic. The energy was unbelievable. Mickey was pumping up the guys in pregame. He had the crowd eating out of his hand. They were showing him on the big screen, hyping up the players during warmups, and everybody was just going crazy. And they get a 3-and-out stop right out of the gates, and then march 70-some yards down on a just perfection touchdown drive. And all of a sudden, people are looking around like, is this really happening? Then reality set in, where Nebraska's laundry list of defensive flaws became grossly apparent. The offense slowed down once they got off the script. And again, like I said, the reality of the situation set in and got rid of all that emotional high they were running off going into the game. So, yeah, it was a difficult spot this week. And I guess the good news is they have a bye. So they have two straight weeks to try to figure some things out. They're going to continue to reevaluate the roster. There's a chance there might be some further coaching staff shakeups, whether it be reassignments or beyond that, that they're going to really look at here. I just don't know what more they can really do. They've already played a lot of guys, and really no one's playing that well. And so I just don't know from a personnel standpoint, different things they can try as far as new starters or whatnot. Schematically, you're already 4 games into the season. Are you going to do a complete overhaul of what you've been working all the way up to this point? So their hands are kind of tied a little bit. And to your point, Mickey Joseph's is in a real tough spot. And I know he really wants this job. He said it publicly, but he's got a very steep uphill battle ahead of him this year.
Yeah, Robin, I read on Husker Online, by the way, you guys, great work. Obviously, I've worked with Sean and you guys. I'll be doing a show, in fact, with Husker Online on Monday night, and we'll have to reiterate some of these points, unfortunately, as you're noting. But I wonder, let's look big picture here now that we know, in essence, this is a lost season. It's Mickey Joseph's effort to try out for the position. Obviously, it's not off to a great start. Pretty difficult set of circumstances, to say the least. But I know you noted, and I watched the game yesterday, that it got off to such a great start. And obviously, that place is as good as any in college football when things are going well. Nebraska hasn't really been blown out. This is a situation where, by and large, all of these losses that led, obviously, to Scott Frost's firing were real close losses. He couldn't win any of them, seemingly, and inevitably, he got fired. This is the first we've seen of a team get absolutely, even against Oklahoma a year ago, Robin, I know you well know, in Norman, that's a close football game. That comes down to the fourth quarter. Did you see this coming yesterday? Did you note that this is a little bit different, that a lot of these guys in that locker room now have had to reassess how happy they are to be there? The coach that recruited them has been fired. Where are their heads at now as you have a chance to kind of talk to these players? There is still a lot of football to be played.
Yeah, I mean, as you would imagine, they're in a rough spot as well. Just the tone of the players that talked after the game. They tried to say all the right things, but I think they're starting to kind of understand the reality of their situation as well. And so that's going to be the real battle here, and the real challenge for Mickey and this coaching staff is just keeping what happened Saturday from happening again, at least keeping the team competitive and playing with fight and all that stuff that will at least keep this from turning into a total disaster beyond what it already is. And no, I did not see, I mean, I won't say like I totally ruled it out that they could get blown out, but the history suggested that this would be a much more competitive game. I mean, obviously go back to last year. Yeah, they were 3-9, but as we all know, they're the best 3-9 team of all time, where they had just one score loss after another and found ways to turn wins into losses at the very end. And so that's kind of how I thought this one was going to go. A lot similar to the game in Norman, where I thought Nebraska was going to be able to ride that emotion and the kind of resurgence of confidence they got with Mickey a little bit longer than they did. But clearly, like I said, they've got a lot of problems on their hands right now that, emotion can only take them so far. And, especially on the defensive side of the ball, there's a big mess on their hands right now. And so that, what was surprising wasn't the fact that it was a lopsided score, but the fact that it was just completely non-competitive after the first 5 minutes or so. I thought that they were going to play with a little bit more just fight. I mean, being able to tackle better and fight to the football the way that they did to start that game. That was short-lived, and that loss was the first time Nebraska's ever just been completely blown out. I think going back to like the last 13 losses. I mean, they've been competitive. They've lost a lot, but at least they've been competitive. And so that's probably the biggest concern right now is not only did they lose, but the manner at home in which they lost when, they had the 71 championship team on the sidelines. Tom Osborne's up there, doing video promos, and to have that kind of effort, the question about how they respond to that now becomes greater than ever.
Yeah, final thing, and we don't want to beat a dead horse. Obviously, the situation is dire right now. Trev Alberts with the coaching search. It'll go on through the course of the year. I just mentioned at the top, tough deal for Mickey Joseph to have that be his first game. But you touched on something that I think is even more alarming to most college football fans. And if you're a college football fan, you know that Nebraska has the black shirts. They can rely on good defense most years, or certainly they take pride in it. Going back to the game in Ireland, and then you bring it back up, all of the games, whether it's Northwestern, North Dakota, GSU, doesn't really matter. Everybody's attacking the middle of this defense over and over again. That stuck out to me. I know you wrote about it. I know I've seen it before, but I'm watching yesterday, and I think probably about 8 minutes into the game, I began to go, oh, this is a problem. Oklahoma's figured out that they can attack the middle, both running the ball and throwing the ball down the seam. So what can be done, if anything, from a personnel standpoint, or is this sort of just a lost year?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the biggest surprise, in my opinion, is that the defense has been so bad. You go back to last year, the defense played well enough for them to win every game. It was special teams or turnovers or whatever it was that ultimately did them in the end. But now they don't stand a chance right now because of the way the defense is playing. Just the tackling, first and foremost, has been atrocious. We just put up our Pro Football Focus grade outs and just kind of run down, how each player graded out. And every week, the tackling grades have been as dismal as we've seen in a long time. And the biggest culprits are supposed to be their best players. The inside linebackers, they were supposed to be the constants that we knew what we were going to get out of them between Nick Henrich and Luke Reimer. Now, Henrich has missed the last couple games with a hand injury. But, whoever's on the field, whether it's those two starters or their backups, everyone is struggling to stop the run and to tackle in space. And then beyond them is the safety play. Guys like Miles Farmer and Marquise Buford, they're playing almost every defensive snap, and they're not doing any better. And so from a personnel standpoint, what can they do? I don't know, because those are clearly, in the minds of the coaches, their best guys, and they're struggling as much as anyone on that defense. And it has become blatantly clear to every opposing offense that prepares for Nebraska that if you just do a slant over the middle, you're going to get 7 to 10 yards every time, like clockwork. And they're not getting any pass rush. They brought in O'Shawn Mathis, the highly regarded transfer from TCU. He's been a complete non-factor. Garrett Nelson is supposed to be the face of their defense. He's hardly made plays. And so Caleb Tanner, he was named a team captain, a 6-year senior, a guy that they were really counting on. He hasn't done much of anything. And so all these guys that were supposed to be the heart and soul of this defense are struggling mightily. I'll even go on the perimeter. So not just the middle, the cornerback play, especially yesterday, was as bad as we've seen it. And, those guys like Quentin Newsome, and they brought in Tommy Hill, the transfer from Arizona State. Like, all these guys that you were told were supposed to be, high-level defenders that were going to be kind of, like I said, the strength, arguably, of this team as the offense kind of went through its transition with all the turnover there. They've been as much of a liability as anything. And if they can't stop the run, and if they can't cover people, and if they can't defend the middle of the field, it doesn't matter if it's Oklahoma, Georgia Southern, North Dakota, or whoever. They're going to have problems beating anybody at this point. So that is priority number one on Mickey Joseph's plate, is figuring out how to make Nebraska's defense at least somewhat competent compared to what it's been the last 4 weeks.
All right, Nebraska fans, I'm not patronizing. Big hug. Robin just laid out a litany of problems, and it was at every position of the defense.
Just go down the list. I'll tell you why it sucks.
If they tweak this, Jeff, no, this guy's not any good. This guy they brought in, they told us was good. He can't play. The middle of the defense is awful. Everybody scores on us. We'll see.
The running backs have been good. I'll give them that. They've got good production out of their running backs. So
that's true. That's true.
Silver lining.
Hey, Robin, great work as always. Thanks, man. Husker Online, the website where you can read Robin and that gang. They do the work every week, regardless of that score. And you guys will learn about the coaching search as well. And you can do it all for just $1. It's Husker Online. Robin, be well. We'll talk to you again down the road. Hopefully, better circumstances.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Take care. So it is. Nebraska is a mess. And what are you going to do when you have as many problems as they do? Mickey Joseph or anybody else at this point is absolutely in a position of just trying to salvage something together where that Nebraska perhaps could get to 4 or 5 wins along those lines. His efforts to produce a resume that might see the upper echelon at Nebraska's administration take a look at him are off to a tough start, to say the least. Thomas Frank Carr going to join us next. They're not off to a rough start at all. Penn State's playing very good football and went into the Plains and hammered Auburn. I joked at the outset that no doubt Auburn's faithful, looking for a new coach. Hell, they were looking for a new coach last year. They didn't want this coach this year. Penn State just furthered along the process, probably a resounding furthering of the process. And we bring in Tuskar right now. Hey, you doing all right? You got to be happy with what you're seeing right now from Penn State. This is a fun team to watch.
Yeah, and it's, I think, what Penn State fans have been asking for the entire time under James Franklin, because it wasn't just that Penn State went in and rolled up on Auburn. They did it on the ground. 245 yards rushing. Nick Singleton, 10 carries, 124 yards. And they ran when everyone knew they were going to run. They did a lot of diverse stuff in the run game as well. So it's not the same old Nittany Lions under James Franklin. This is an evolution more so than it's just playing a team that's kind of in a tough spot. So the way they handled business also makes everyone feel very good in Happy Valley today.
Thomas Frank Carr joins us right now on College Football Recap here on the On3 Network. That is Blue and White Illustrated, if you're wondering. And I'm going to give Thomas credit right now before we get moving forward. I check everybody's work, especially those I'm going to be working with. And they told me, hey, listen, make sure you pay close attention to the Penn State game. I said, I love college football. I was going to anyhow. But I saw you predict, I do believe, if memory serves, at least a 3-touchdown victory. Is that right? Kudos, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And so it just comes down to looking at the opponent and what they do. And if Auburn came in with the same game plan that they did last season, there wasn't much that confused or frustrated Sean Clifford. And when you beat Sean Clifford, you confuse him and you make him uncomfortable. He will break down his mechanics. And last season, they played a lot of soft coverage. They didn't blitz. They didn't get guys in the backfield. And it was much the same script coming into this season of people were saying, oh, they're saving something for Penn State. That's not who Auburn is. From what I can tell from what Brian Harsin wants to do, he wants to play fast and he wants to play simple. But if you just play simple, Sean Clifford picked them apart last year, and he had to do even less in this game because Penn State's a better team. They had explosive rushing from Nick Singleton, and the senior quarterback was efficient and effective in the first half. So, yeah, I didn't see where the points were coming from for Auburn. TJ Finley is not an effective quarterback, and Penn State's defense, I think it was much overstated how physical and how dominant this offensive line is by Penn State fans. And I spent most of the week trying to say, listen, don't feed into the mythology of an SEC team that you don't know. If you watch how they play, they're very similar to what Penn State has been as a ground attack over the last several seasons. They're not physically dominant. They're good blockers. And that simple system, Manny Diaz had a great scheme to defeat it, get on the other side of the line of scrimmage. In a lot of ways, this was the game his defense is built to attack. So they got on the other side of the line of scrimmage. They limited that ground game. And it wasn't coming into the game a hard prediction when you're looking at the facts and figures. It was just, is Penn State a good team, or are they going to be a team that plays down to Auburn? And they did not play down to Auburn. So therefore, the 3-touchdown victory.
And you mentioned it. I think it was 477 total yards, but the balance with all of that, and they were able to run the football to the tune of over 200 yards. We won't learn anything more about Penn State next week because it's Central Michigan. So I guess let's look at the big picture here. You've had a chance to look at this team. You've done a great job of breaking it down. People who follow you know this. What are they? I was first asked this question just as a fan of college football, and I watch Penn State all the time. And oftentimes it's an up and down affair with my relationship with Sean Clifford. So is that the way
Yeah.
you guys? Now, I am obviously making it clear that perhaps I'm a sporting guy. So
Yeah.
Sean has frustrated me at times, not in the way that they would a Penn State fan who just wants to see them win the game, but in the way that a guy who's trying to cover is sometimes frustrated with. So what is he as a quarterback? Give me the strengths, give me the weaknesses. I think I know him, but your expertise is more important than what I think from afar.
So unfortunately, and I don't want to knock a guy after he just had a good game,
Right.
but even in this game, there were times and there were moments that pocket presence is his worst trait, where you get some pressure from the right tackle. He sidesteps instead of stepping into a clean pocket, avoiding that pressure, and he underthrows a ball that would have been a touchdown or would have been a big completion to Mitchell Tinsley. And then a couple times you saw in the Purdue game, just overthrows a receiver in the middle of the field. Was there a miscommunication? Was there not a miscommunication on that play? Some people have brought that up, and from what I saw in film, it was an overthrow. And then in this game, he has two really good plays in the first half that would have broken the game open a little bit earlier, but he underthrows those balls, and they're clean reads. So James Franklin has said at the beginning of this season, our offense is inconsistent during the Purdue game and during the Ohio game, where they only put up 24 points, I think it was, in the first half. Sean Clifford's an inconsistent player, so that's what you're going to get. 14 points in the first half, where Penn State was the better team the entire time, and really it wasn't all Clifford. Some false starts, some penalties, some mental mistakes. I think they were pretty juiced up for the game, and that's where you get that inconsistency. So really, it's pocket presence, and then under pressure, what Sean Clifford is going to show up. Because in this game, he corrected those issues. He was better in the pocket. He sidestepped some pressure. He stepped into throws, and he got Penn State out of some jams. But there are games he won't do that. And it's just what guy shows up. I can't tell you. I've been watching him since the dawn of time, and I can't tell you what the special sauce is that good Sean Clifford shows up and where bad Sean Clifford shows up. And for Penn State fans, if they get into a situation where they need him, sometimes it's just 50-50 on what the outcome of that play is, where he's got to be the sixth-year senior that takes over and makes the right read.
How good are Singleton and Allen? I mean, you got two young backs that, for people outside the program, you kind of look at this and you go, man, they've got an abundance of riches. And those kids, they're young, but they look dynamic. Body types seem ready to go, obviously. A lot of times you wonder about the wear and tear for young players, but these two guys, that's a two-headed monster.
Yeah, and it's because they were both early enrollees as well. Both came in January, had a chance to go through the strength and conditioning program. Nicholas Singleton is a physical freak. He has been a physically impressive player since his senior season in high school, and it's only gotten better. And by the way, I think there's even more to come in his future. I think he still has more room to grow. He's going to be a complete sort of back, power, speed, all that stuff, but he's still, in a lot of ways, learning, and his vision is getting better, and he's learning how to run in certain schemes. Penn State's done a really good job of evolving their offense to adapt these skill players. They were very much, what I mentioned about the Auburn rushing attack of kind of simple stuff, very zone heavy. That's what Penn State was for James Franklin for a long time. But this season, they're incorporating more man, more gap, more power. And Nick Singleton came from an option offense. So he's used to reading blocks. He's used to watching guys pull and waiting for those and then exploding through the hole. So they're incorporating his strengths into the offense, and dynamic. I mean, you saw the highlight Brenton Strange on CBS. Once he got in the open field, it was touchdown. There's no question if he's leaving. And then for Catron Allen, this is the guy that is a delight to watch for film analysts because he sees with the vision of, I keep saying a sophomore running back, but I've seen sophomore running backs that don't see anything. Like He's just such an advanced football player from his understanding of blocking schemes, setting up things, inside running as well. He's a great zone runner. So they're very different in their skills, but they complement each other very well. And so far, they're creating this 1-2 punch for Penn State that has put the starter, Kevon Lee, for the last couple of years, kind of on the side burner. Nick Singleton officially got his first start, I believe, this past game as the starting running back. So these guys, they're the future, but they're also the present, and they're operating and they're making the offensive line better by making these plays because Penn State has been improving and working at that front of what they're doing now is they're getting to their blocks. They're not dominating just yet. They're not consistently pushing guys off the ball, but they're doing their job. And when they do their job, the running backs are doing their job, and it's creating these big plays that you see.
Last thing, and I'll let you go. And, there wasn't a lot to analyze in this game. So thank you for how thorough you've been, because I was going to have you on and say, what's there to analyze after an ass kicking? Because in every aspect of the game, Thomas, it was all Penn State. There was really nothing to take away. I thought physically they were the vastly superior team as well, not just scheme, not just execution, but player for player. I think a lot of people assume that the SEC is always going to have the advantage there. They didn't in this matchup at all. So I'll ask you big picture, what is Penn State's ceiling? We make the mistake as college football fans, I think, of trying to project ahead all the time rather than living in the moment and enjoying a win and watching a team improve. I'm guilty of it too, because we always want to know, is our team good enough to make the college football playoff? Is our team good enough to win our conference? Is our team going to be lauded on College game day? Like everybody wants their tribe to win. How good is Penn State? What is their ceiling?
So that is to be determined because this team is improving weekly. We mentioned those freshmen running back who have arrived early. And really, I think for people that were following the program, they've arrived on time, but it was a question of, is it week 1? Is it week 4 when they take over? And they took over in week 2 against Ohio. So that part is locked in. But Penn State's class of 2022 had a lot of very talented players. And how many of those guys can step in and get integrated into the offense and the defense as quickly as possible is going to determine kind of the ceiling of this team. Back in 2019, Penn State fans were saying 2020 is our year. Micah Parsons, Odafe Owe, this offense, this defense, they're all going to be hitting at the right time where they're veterans. And my point was, why can't they hit early? These guys are unbelievably talented. Why can't they hit a year early? And Penn State was a collapse in the fourth quarter and, battle with Minnesota away from being in the college football playoff conversation. There are more young players that have to play that way this year, but watch out for Abdul Carter, number 11. He is a force. He went from a guy that I watched in high school, his 10th grade season. I'm sorry, his junior season. He had just moved to linebacker. He was getting his feet wet, kind of unsure of everything. He flipped the switch his senior season and has become one of the most instinctive linebackers I've watched in a long time. And that progression now is snowballing. He had a forced fumble. He had a sack, a pass breakup. The only thing he didn't have in that game was an interception and a partridge in a pear tree. But he is becoming a force for the Nittany Lions. So how many of those young guys, 5-star defensive end denied Dennis Sutton, how quickly can he get into the rotation? He's kind of playing in the third string in these mop-up situations. Can he become a player along the defensive line as well? That's going to dictate their ceiling. And they need to have that hit in early October because they got to. There's always a 3-game meat grinder that you got to go through. And this year, Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio State, I believe it is what it is in October. So they've got to be at their best at that point. If they get through that, then I think they can challenge for the Big Ten title. But that's always the if, that 3-game schedule. Do you get 2 of those 3? Even if you lose to Ohio State, can you be in that conversation late? And with Sean Clifford, I don't know how to predict that, but I think that this team is much better than we expected coming into the season. The offensive line is another thing. That evolution, if that continues, then I think they can easily compete for a Big Ten title. Whether or not they get there remains to be seen.
He's Thomas Frank Carr, the website Blue and White Illustrated on 3. Join now. It's a buck. How could you not? You got to do it. His insight's always great. I'll talk to you down the line. Thank you so much, Thomas. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Appreciate it. This is fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. This is good, man. We're going to do this each week. I'll get you back on. Yeah, this is going to be a good time. I actually am having fun with this as well as we kind of survey the landscape of the top 25, talk about the big wins, the big losses, and everything in between. You know, it's funny. I was mentioning a moment ago, and coming up here in a moment, we'll have a chance to talk to Gary Furman from canesport.com. And we'll talk about Miami's effort on the road. They fell short against Texas A&M. But I'm interested to hear what Gary has to say about where Miami's headed. They're kind of in a team in flux as well with some of the changes. But I talk about the ways we take inventory, obviously, every Sunday, right? We all get up Sunday morning after a weekend of college football action. We look at that top 25, whatever games we consumed. If you're a diehard like I am, or you work in the industry, then you're going to go back and watch some of the condensed games. You're going to go back and see where teams are headed, what trajectory they're on. Is a team that looked good early beginning to wane? Is a team that looked poor early beginning to gel? Those types of things. And I mean, what do you make of a team like Oregon? Big picture, right? We saw them get blown out by Georgia, but everybody's getting blown out by Georgia. Georgia looks like right now the creme de la creme of college football. Will they sustain that throughout the course of the season? Probably. They have the personnel to, but one thing we know about these kids is that frequently they are subject to the whims of emotion, and you'll see play kind of ebb and flow. Guys get bored. Things happen where perhaps you see a poor performance, and all of a sudden you're in a situation where, they lose a game they shouldn't lose. So Oregon bounces back nicely. That is a great way to talk about how a team is not something definitively one weekend and going to be that for the rest of the season. They were on the wrong end of that embarrassing beatdown, but then they gave one to BYU over the weekend. Texas A&M as well. I mentioned at the outset, they get a win after Jimbo Fisher was hearing it throughout the course of the week. And of course, they had to switch quarterbacks. They go to Brad Johnson's kid, Max. He does just enough. Meanwhile, enough teams in this top 25, as we go back and look at that and the scores from those games, those teams like NC State are a bit of a mystery, right? They have not dominated up to this point, but you talk about the experience of that team, good quarterback play, big on the offensive and defensive lines. Their best football may be forthcoming. They got the win over the weekend over Texas Tech, probably, as I said, their best all-around performance, 27-14. You go back to that Notre Dame loss to Ohio State. At the time that game played, we thought we knew that Notre Dame was going to be a real good defense and play everybody pretty tight because, goodness gracious, they hung with Ohio State. And we began to wonder, is Ohio State's offense not as good as it was supposed to be? And now, are we still having those same questions? I don't think so. Ohio State, 77 points. I think they're the class of the Big Ten offensively, obviously. And they're the team that people are going to predict to win the conference. We'll see, though. There are some big challenging moments in the schedule for Ohio State, and Penn State could be one of those. And Thomas just joined us to talk about that. And that's exciting because I don't think we thought anybody really would, beyond Michigan, challenge Ohio State for Big Ten, dominance. And yet, I think there's an opportunity, obviously, for a couple of teams, Michigan and Penn State, to have a say there. The other thing to note in this top 25, what is Washington? What is Washington? We're not entirely certain just yet. We know that was a really good win over Michigan State, but I don't know what Michigan State is. Some of my people there in East Lansing have said this isn't going to be a great year for the Spartans. We'll see. Obviously, well thought of, well coached. We know that. Southern Cal, hard to get a read on Southern Cal. The offense is going to be great. Riley, that's what he does. And also those numbers are gaudy, to say the least. They will be, with the amount of talent that they have. Those numbers will be gaudy because, look, that's what you expect. It's why you brought him in. It's who he is. Year in and year out, you expect those offenses to be explosive. I'm not too surprised by that, but I do want to see them play somebody better than what we saw over the weekend. Obviously, Southern Cal didn't have much of a contest there. So, top 25 recap. We're going to do it every Sunday. It's going to be a blast to do. And I will say again, like and subscribe on 3 right now with the deals that we have going. It's just $1. Appreciate you. Is that Joycelyn? I see, new member jumping on in. A bunch of other people in the chat. I will also have an opportunity for you guys to react with us as we go through and talk about what teams are or are not. You can obviously say, hey, I want in, I want to talk, I want to ask questions. We'll start to do this as the show develops each week. Again, Gary Furman is going to be set to join us here momentarily. We don't have him just yet. So I do want to talk a little bit about what Miami looks to be to me, but Gary will know more than I will. If you watched that game last night, something that we see fairly consistent at this point is the fact that Tyler Van Dyke, who a year ago I thought really showed immense promise, showed to be a guy that was trending to being one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He has not been on the same page. This offense does not look the way it did under Coach Lashley. So you just wonder, how soon will they be able to, I guess, round into form, for lack of a better term, because they looked really good defensively last night. And again, you might counter with, yeah, Jeff, they were playing Texas A&M's offense, and that's fair. But I would also say that Miami's got a lot of room to grow. They're without their leading receiver, Xavier Restrepo. Other guys are going to have to step up. That hasn't happened as of yet. Van Dyke last night, 217 yards on 21 of 41 passing. And again, you have to ask the question, how much did they miss Lashley? He had time to throw. If you go back and look at the PFF grades I did this morning, I wanted to see was he under an inordinate amount of pressure. The answer is no. So far, he hasn't been under an inordinate amount of pressure, and he wasn't in this game either. He has time. It's just not clicking right now. They did get a lot of production in the run game there. The offensive line has improved defensively. Miami, I think, is going to be a problem for most teams in the ACC. As we continue to look at some of their numbers, they look great, but because Mesidor came back, and that makes a big difference. There was 3 sacks, 6 tackles for loss. They lose the game, but it wasn't because of their defense. They struggled in the red zone. Leonard Taylor played very well. Darrell Jackson played very, very well. They're a team that I think will continue to grow. And for Miami, one of the interesting things is that their best games and their future seems very bright because of what Cristobal brings to the table as a recruiter, what I think their identity will be. And then, of course, we've seen the uptick in NIL contributions there. Miami, if they keep the talent that's homegrown in the state, they'll be very, very good very, very soon. As it pertains to this year, though, you have to wonder how quickly can they get there on offense, because Van Dyke has taken a step back. I don't want to put it all on him. His receivers have had some drops as well. That can be very frustrating, obviously, for a quarterback who had such a good year. I see Gary right now. There's my man, Canesport.com. Gary Furman set to join us right now on College Football Recap. Gary, how are you? Good afternoon.
Oh, doing good, Jeff. How you doing, man? Team no sleep here, but happy to be with you.
I won't keep you forever, brother. I just wanted to pick your brain here. This is an interesting Miami team. I thought the defense played very well last night. We all saw the upward trajectory that Van Dyke was on a year ago. Seems like the timing is off right now. I mentioned Restrepo before you came on. Hasn't played. You got other guys that have to step up. It's a new offense. How much does he miss Lashley?
Well, I mean, there's a problem sometimes in college football that's called graduation, and guys moving on, and they seem to be moving on quicker and quicker in today's game. Tyler Van Dyke lost his 2 top receivers from last year, and Miami has not been able to replace them adequately, and it's affecting him greatly. He's not having things come as easy so far this year as they did a year ago. And it's really the big problem right now for Miami offensively. They can't score points because they're not getting anything easily. Last night they had 27 first downs. They outgained Texas A&M by, I think it was about 100 yards, but they weren't able to score touchdowns. They don't have enough playmakers on this team so that when the degree of difficulty goes up like it did last night in a very, very crazy hostile atmosphere at Texas A&M against a desperate football team and a desperate fan base willing their team to victory, they just didn't have the guys that could make plays down the field. And it was 2 station to station, and they were unable to score points.
Gary, one of the things, I can look at this several different ways. I think if I'm a Miami fan, I'm not too discouraged right now. The long-term outlook for Miami is very, very good. We know they've poured money into the program. You have a talented young quarterback. Cristobal has come home. He'll recruit well and keep more players in the state. There'll be a mentality. They'll fight for him. This game, oddly, I think I'd throw my hands to the air. You're right about the playmakers not coming through, but a lot of trips to the red zone. You only score 9 points on those 4 trips in the red zone. You also had the fumbled punt early, which I think obviously changed the game because the fans could get into it there. 3 plays later, Texas A&M scored. But I thought the offensive line and pass pro held up pretty well. You got contributions on the ground running against a good Texas A&M defense. I don't know that I'm all that – nobody wants to lose, but I don't know that I'm all that upset if I'm a Miami fan because there was enough there that projects well.
Totally agree with you, Jeff. I walked out of it with a fairly positive feeling about Miami. I don't think anybody in the ACC Coastal is going to match them at the line of scrimmage. I mean, they were very good at the line of scrimmage last night on both sides of the ball. Their defensive line, I thought, played exceptionally well, short of a handful of plays. I thought their offensive line played tougher and blocked better in the run game than we've seen Miami offensive line in a very long time. And, those are very positive things to build off of. And, Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator, will get a better feel for his guys and he will, I think, be able to adjust his schemes and play calls to gear more towards their strengths. And they're not going to face a stable of athletes like Texas A&M brought to the stadium last night, probably until they go to Clemson in mid-November. And that's with all respects to Florida State and some of the other teams in the Coastal. But Texas A&M, they had their own struggles against App State, but quality athletes is not their issue. And they had a few defensive backs out last night. You never would have known it. They're so deep, in quality players at that spot. I agree with you. I think that Miami needs to build on the positives from this game and then build back up to those games later in the season where they're going to need to be at their best again. And I think that they should show up just as good or better.
Talking to Gary Furman, canesport.com, also part of the On3 Network. Gary does a great job. You guys can get keen insight from him and his staff always. I want to invite all of you. We'll be doing this weekend recap college football top 25 every week. We'll pick 3 or 4 games. We'll have the experts on from the sites on the ground there, covering the teams on a daily basis, providing you the insight that you're going to want. And one of the things you brought up a moment ago, Gary, that I think is important, and I want to ask you, just how good can this defense be? Because Mesidor was back, 3 sacks, 6 tackles for loss for this defense. Taylor, Harvey, Jackson. Oh, that group was exceptional last night. I think Miami's defense is going to continue to grow.
Yeah, they are getting really good play at the defensive line position, both at end and tackle. So that is covering up a lot of the problems that they have. I mean, they're short at linebacker. That's no secret. But I'd say 80-85% of the time, because the D-line is playing so well, that those problems they have at linebacker don't show up in the game. Now, last night's game, I think that was the case, but then you get this single play where they throw a simple pass out into the flat, and Wayman Steed, one of these linebackers that I'm talking about, totally whiffed on the tackle. And now it became a touchdown in a very tight game. And that's the difference between winning and losing. And that's the problem that Miami's going to have when the degree of difficulty gets this high, and why, in my opinion, this will be maybe a 9-win football team as opposed to a 10 or 11-win football team, because they're going to have the moments when the competition is really good that they do get exposed where they are weak. And Mario Cristobal and the staff did a great job in the transfer portal, fortifying some areas where they could. You see what Henry Parrish is doing at running back. You see what some of these defensive linemen are doing that they picked up in the portal. They were not able to get receivers in the portal. They were only able to get 1 linebacker in the portal. And those are still big weak spots for Miami. And when you get into a game like last night and you don't have receivers to make big plays, you have problems scoring points, which is what we saw. And then when you don't have linebackers, good offensive coordinators are going to find ways at different points in the game to expose that. And in a tight defensive battle like that, where you had no margin of error, it ends up being one of the few differences in a game where statistically you were the better team, over the course of 4 quarters.
Gary, I'm going to talk to you on and off all year long. Miami will be central to the conversation in the top 25. We know that. We go back a long way covering our respective teams. It's a pleasure to be with you, sir. I would invite everybody. Gary Furman, canesports.com. Join right now. This is the kind of insight you'll get every week as we bring our guests on. Thanks, Gary. Enjoy your Sunday, buddy.
Anytime, man. Great being with you.
Yep, take care. That's Gary Furman, canesport.com, part of the On3 network. And this is, again, maiden voyage. Here it is. We're going to be doing this every Sunday. I look forward to kind of forging out a path here with you guys in the chat, having our various guests on from the On3 sites. This is the kind of good service you're going to get and insights you'll get if you join On3 today. It's just $1 right now. That special keeps rolling. I keep screaming, it's $1. Why wouldn't you do it? I belong to most things for $1 as long as it's not insidious. You're going to get a lot of information. You're going to get a lot of cool things from people that are there covering these teams. So I want to thank Trey and Chris, both doing a great job producing the show. Follow me if you want at Jay Cameron Show. On a day-to-day basis, I cover Florida State University so that you'll have full transparency. I am a Nole, but I'm also a fan of college football, diehard fan of college football, and capable of being objective as we look at the big picture, the thread that we all share, right? This commonality, that this love and passion for college football that brings us to a show like this or brings us to a website that On3 hosts or anything like that. I'll be with you all year long. We can do it. We can have fun together. So let's do so again next Sunday. Like and subscribe to this. That way you have an opportunity. Hammer that like. Does us a favor, certainly, and also tells other college football fans where they can find college football talk. And it gives you a chance to connect with us each Sunday at 11 a.m. All right, that'll do it for the college football recap. Again, thanks, Trey and Chris. Appreciate you guys very, very much. Thanks to our guest. I just mentioned Gary Furman a moment ago. Did a great job, canesport.com. Thomas Frank Carr breaking it down, blue and white illustrated for the Penn State Nittany Lions. And then we really had to thank Robin Washut, who joined us. Husker Online, great site. Those guys do a great job. It'll be fun to follow them as the coaching search is underway at Nebraska. Until next time, enjoy the NFL if that's your cup of tea today, and we'll talk to you next Sunday on the College Football Recap. Take care, everybody.